Okay. Happy Friday, everybody. So I'm going to go through the typical charts relatively quickly today because I do have some other information I wanted to go over, and I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about housing affordability. Because I mean, there's all different types of articles out there, and I just wanted to kind of give my input of what I see is happening. So, all right, here we go. So median price, and again, this is all of Charleston. So median price here we are, let me move this screen. So we're up 9.8%. So 410 from a year ago. So last October, we were at 373,500. So we're up to 410. So that is still, again, pretty healthy growth. And I'm just looking at my calendar here. I'm trying to remember what it was last year, but hold on a second. Something doesn't seem, it's all property types. There we go. That was the problem. It's like, that doesn't sound right. All right, let me start over again. Something's not all property, residential. There we go. Sorry, I was clicked on something else. 407,093. So up 1.8%. So last October was 400. So again, if you look at the last year and a half, almost 2 years, we're fairly flat, right? Some seasonal influences, but we're fairly flat, up 1.8%. And if you look at, go back in time, you look at longer term, you can see the growth, the quick growth at COVID, low interest rates, and but look at the last couple of years, right? Fairly flat, not down, so flat. So let's zoom in again. So that's median sales price, 1.8%. Price per square foot, up 2.3, around the same. And again, same sort of graph, fairly flat over the last couple of years. Percent of original price, we're at 99.3% as a median. So off the high from what we experienced post-COVID and then also this last year. We're going this seasonality though, so it's going to start to go down a little bit like it did last year. If you look at the average, you can see it in the average off a little bit, 97.2. So sellers are having to negotiate sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they're having to negotiate. Days on market, heading higher, right? We're up to 12. Again, this is median days on market. And if you looked at, we were 7, 6, 7 over the summer. Last year, at the beginning of the year, we're at 3. But starting to drift higher, which is normal. And again, if you go back in time, look at the seasonality, you could see it every year, right? Well, we lost it, and now what does this look like? It looks like seasonality is returning. So don't be surprised we go up to where we were 25 in February. Don't be surprised we hit the 20s. This is the seasonality going to kick in over the winter. It's going to take a little bit longer to sell your house. Again, perfectly normal. No panic. Months of supply, 2 months of supply. Again, fairly flat over the last couple of years. There's seasonality to months of supply too. So if we go back, you can see a little bit of it. We lost it for a couple of years and then it's returning. But when you look at 2 months of inventory, that's below pre-recession numbers, as low as we've ever been in the past 3 years, right? So we're pretty much setting new marks. I mean, we were 0.7 months was the record low, but 2, if you go back in time, is still very much a seller's market. Let me zoom in again. Homes for sale. Again, I don't necessarily agree with all these numbers because I have the calendar. I keep track of everything. So we're at 2982, which shows we're off 14%. So when I look at today's numbers, we have 3,021 for sale. And last November 3rd, we had 3,163, right? So we're down. I don't believe we're down 14%, but we're lower than we were a year ago. and historically still probably roughly half of where we were prior to COVID. So, we were around 6,000 in summer of 2019, and now we're at 3,000. So it's kind of an easy mark. Now the 3,000, this is the highest we've been all year, right? When I'm looking at my calendar, we got down to 2146 in May. So we're at 3,000. So we've increased over the past 6 to 7 months from 2146 to 3,000. So inventory is coming up, more than what this chart shows, but it is coming up. So just watch as we go into, we're going to have this slack off for the holidays, right? So who's listing right now and wants to move between Thanksgiving and Christmas? So it's going to be a slower time period for new listings. But then I believe January 1st, when that comes on the market, we're going to start to head higher, which we typically would do. Like if we go prior to COVID, if you look at, here's January of 18, right? Low of 5,000. And what happens? We go up into the summer, right? So that was fairly typical. And then look what happens in 19. Low here in December, we go up. So I expect we're going to start to see some of this seasonality return. And if you look at last year, we hit a low in February and we went up, right? So this should hit a low January-ish and go up from here. So I don't think it's going to jump because we still have sellers locked in really low rates, but we should go higher once we reach January. Closed sales, 8.1% lower than October of last year. So less closings this year, even though last year, so we did 1393 last year, 1280 this year. Interest rates were starting to spike up to 6.5, 7 back here. What's happening now? Well, now they're spiking back up to 8. So this is probably partially attributable to less houses for sale, but also higher rates.
How does it, I'm sorry to interrupt. So less houses for sale, but what's the what's the price point? Like it's less houses, but is volume still up there?
So volumes, our sales price, so you have 1.8% up on, closing median price with a combination of down 8.1%. So when you look at dollar volume, it's fairly flat, right? Up 1%. That's kind of, about even, right? But still, since we're on dollar volume, I just want to put a perspective on if you get rid of the season, you can see the seasonality, right? So, and this is what I tell everybody, is like, if you want to get rid of these gyrations and see market trends, go to rolling 12 months. Because as soon as you go to rolling 12 months, what it's going to show, here's the market cycle as a whole, right? And boom, you can see right when COVID opened up, what happened? Boom, here's the rise and getting rid of the seasonality. And then we, as rates started to come up, what happened? The volume started going back down, and a combination of not enough homes for sale, but also less affordable housing. But look at the trend over the last 3 to 4 months. What does that look like? It looks like we're trying to find a bottom, right? And this is the biggest thing that we want to watch for. It looks like it's bottoming out, and it's bottoming out on an annual, we're almost at 10 billion on a 12-month basis. Pre-COVID, we were at 7 billion, right? So we're still our bottom is way higher than we were here, right? And it looks like it's trying to find it. New listings, let me go back to monthly real quick. So new listings, flat. We almost listed the same number of properties this October than we did last October. But look at the peak. The peak in 2022 was 2,600 homes. It was 2,600 homes in 2021, almost 2,600 in 2020, 2,619, 2,618. What's the difference? Our peak was 2,100. Right. So we just never reached the new listing count as we did even prior to COVID. we haven't been putting on the same number of new listings, and that's because sellers just aren't motivated. So this is something to watch out for going to next year, is like, are we able to return to this level of listings? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but we just didn't do it this year. Pending sales, this is encouraging. So look at pending sales. Everything else kind of relatively flat, let's say. Look at that, up 22.2%. So, and keep in mind, this is from an October of 2023 standpoint compared to October of 2022. So 1,207 contracts in 2022 and 1,475 this year. So if pending sales are up 22.2%, what should closed sales be in the next 30, 60, 90 days? It should be higher, right? So this is a positive trend. And if we go to a rolling 12 months, look at that. I mean, I would say, doesn't that look like we're forming a bottom? I mean, I know this last month is higher, right? That reflects the 22% increase, right? And I'm not completely sold on this. I want a month or two more of data, but this certainly looks like we're forming a bottom. And the bottom is actually below pre-COVID. So, for us to go from here to here, that's not going to happen next year, right? This is going to take a little bit of time to get back up to this type of level we were at, but it does look like we're forming a bottom. And remember, this is when you do the 12 months, we're getting rid of seasonality. So this is showing, yes, November, December, and January are slower months, yes, but the market as a whole is showing signs of reaching a bottom. And then, we talked about dollar volume. I want to go back to closed sales for a second. So let's go back in time, and we're doing a rolling 12 months. So I just want to take you back in history. So pre-recession, we hit a kind of a peak around 18,000, right? So pre-recession, 18,000, down to 7,700. But what I wanted to show, 18,000 in 2006, we didn't get back to 18,000 until about 2017. So it took us 10, 11 years to get back to where we were here. It's not going to take us 10 to 11 years to get back to where we peaked out. And remember, so the last 12 months, we're off 20%. So under 17,000 homes. Look at the last time we did under 17,000 homes in a rolling 12 months. We're talking 2016. So the last 12 months has been as slow as it was for 7 years in closed sales, right? But look at the trend, right? If we zoom in again, let's zoom in a little bit. I don't think we're at the bottom on closed sales, but the pending sales up 22%, that's telling me we're getting close to it. And I think on the last call, I kind of said, well, I think first quarter will be the bottom. I still feel that way, that it's still a downward trend, but if we can make it through the end of the year till next year, maybe we find our bottom and stay above 16,000 sales in a year. But then it's going to take a little bit of time to work our way back up to the crazy volume of 25,000 sales, right? Don't expect this in 2024, and if you look at, let's take the, roughly the whole year, we were at 19,433, essentially a rolling 12 months in January. We're all the way down to 16,000. That's a pretty significant drop, right? I don't think we're going to be back to 19, 20,000 next year, right? This is going to be a slow ride back up. And then I think once we get past 2024 and we get past the election and rates hopefully settle down, then we can start to increase this and get back up to a higher number. Because, we're still on this downward trend. It's just slowing down. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover on the typical stuff we talk about, but there's one extra thing on Market Monitor I wanted to talk about, and it all has to do with, what do we have coming up next Tuesday? Is we have the referendum on Isle of Palms, right? So, and again, I'm not predicting what's going to happen. I'm just looking back in history. So what happened a couple years ago? Folly Beach, right? So I just want to pull up in here and show you, here's Folly, and we're going to go to sales price, and I'm doing a rolling 12 months, right? And I don't have the date in front of me of when that referendum passed, but look at September of 2022. Folly Beach median price was 1156. What's the Folly Beach median price today? 777,500. You can't tell me that part of this is not due to the short-term rental ban, right? So I don't know what the vote's going to be on Tuesday on Olive Palms, and I don't know what the repercussions are going to be. But here's Folly Beach, and here's some history of what happened on Folly. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant change. When what did our market as a whole do? It was fairly flat, right? So the market as a whole was fairly flat. And look at what happened on Folly. So that's just a side note that we got to watch this vote on Tuesday and what happens and watch that future of what is going to happen. I don't know, but this is what happened on Folly. All right, so changing gears a little bit, I want to talk a lot about affordability because this is all kind of a lot of the articles are on affordability. So I pulled up, and hopefully this will come up. Let me see here. Is everybody, Jackie, do you see the chart that's National Association of Realtors? Okay. So here you go. So this is how, when you hear everything and all these articles, when you talk about affordability, this is the way they calculate it, right? And this is actually, this isn't my chart. This is from National Association of Realtors. And I just want to put a perspective on how they're talking about this. So let's just go, the latest data they had was August of 2023. Well, look at what the rate was, right? So 7.15, it's not that today, but we're just using this as an example. So the way they calculate affordability is, here's the median price in the US for an existing home, $413,500. Here was the mortgage rate that is effective rate off of FH, so basically they're using the same gauge. So 413 median price, 7.15% mortgage rate. Here's the monthly principal and interest. And the way they're calculating the monthly principal and interest, if you look down here, so they're assuming 30-year fixed for the 7.15%, but they're assuming a 20% down payment, right? So this math is with the 20% down payment at 7.15 with this median price. So the payment as a percentage of income, at the same time, they look at the US, the median family income is 98,291. So what they're doing is they're saying 27%, 27.3% of your income, you have to use it to pay for your housing, right? And then what they do is, well, the qualifying income, and the way they qualify income is it's supposed to be 25%, right? Because remember, this payment does not include taxes and insurance, right? And HOA fees, regime fees, whatever. So what they do is they not, everything's off of 25% qualifying ratio. So what they're saying is, well, to afford a median house at the current rates, at a 20% down payment, you're supposed to be making $107,232. But we're only making $98,291. And this is obviously grouping the entire US together, so it's a lot of data points. So it's saying the affordability index is 91.7. So it's saying in general, 100 would be break even. 100 is the median income affords the median house. Anything less than that is unaffordable. Anything more than that is affordable, right? So what I wanted to do is take you back in time. So look at 2020. So this is the year as a whole. So the median price single family home was 300,200. So 300,000. What's the median today? 413. Right? So the mortgage rate was 317. So the monthly payment and interest on the median price home with 20% down was 1,035. What is it today? 2,234. Payment as a percentage of income was 14.7. This is what the median family made, not 84,394. So the qualifying income you needed was only $50,000. So the index was 170. So basically, in 2020, the median family was making 70% more than they needed to afford a median house. Now we're making 8% less than we need to a median house. And the example I wanted to give, and you can see what happened 2021, look at the price change, 2022, price and interest rate. And now we're dealing with interest rate. So we've gone from 1,035 to 2,234 because of price and interest rate. Right. But the example I want to give is like, okay, anybody who bought a home 2020 or prior, we'll just use 2020 as an example. So you have a potential seller who's sitting in this house that they paid $300 for it. That's at 3.17% fixed for 30 years. This is their payment, right? You're asking them to buy the same house, right? Because this was that median house back then. Now this is the median house. So it could be the exact same house, right? So you're asking them to buy the same house and more than double their house payment for the same house, right? So let's say they want to upgrade houses. Well, then it's more than double, right? So this is the challenge is that, and this is just 2020, you know, because people who bought in 2014, they bought it way less and probably refinanced to this. So just for perspective, and I did some math on this, is that remember when they paid 1,035, you know, this was the median income of that household. Well, now that household is making this, right? So, but we've gone from 70% affordability above to 8% below. So this is our challenge, is basically from a seller aspect, this is what they're used to, and now you're asking them to do this for the exact same house. And the one thing that's, I believe, missing on this whole affordability conversation when you look at it on a national basis is that the last stat I saw is 26% of closings were first-time home buyers, right? So 26% of the people directly have this challenge right here, right? So anybody who hasn't owned a home, this is the reality for them, right? They have to be making in this range to afford this house. And that's just qualifying, right? That's just kind of the minimum they have to do. So, but I wanted to put a perspective, if 26% of the people are first-time home buyers, what does that mean? That means 74% of them are not first-time home buyers, right? And when did they buy? They probably bought here or before, right? So now this person has been sitting in their house just for 3 years, let's say. Let's not go back to they bought it in 2005. Let's just say they bought it here. So now they've gained, if they have this exact median house, they've gained 113,000 in equity. Right? So from here to here, if they're saying put, they gain 113,000. Let's say they just put 0% down. Let's say they borrowed 100% to buy this. Well, they've paid principal down, right? Over 3 years, not much, but they paid some, but the house price has gone up. From here to here is a 27% increase. Let me rephrase this. From here to here, they have 27% equity in their existing home from just owning it, right? So I think one gauge that's missed on, you know, on this affordability is that 74% of the people are bringing a ton of equity with them to their next purchase, right? So in this factor, they're not considering those resale home buyers that are selling and buying. They're bringing way more than 20%. Remember, this is calculated off of 20%. Well, by default, even if you borrowed 100% here, you're bringing 27% here. So if you put 20% here down and you're buying here, you have way more than 20% that you're bringing with you, which what does that do? It lowers your monthly P&I even at this interest rate, which puts you way over the 100% affordability. So this is my take on why prices are not going down, is because you're bringing that equity. 74% of the people are bringing that equity with them, and even at the high rates, it's still over 100 of affordability. And also think about it, is so 26% of the people are first-time home buyers, 74 are repeat buyers. Well, 30% of the people are paying cash, right? So this is zero, right? That's zero. So that's very affordable for them, because those people paying cash are probably still making money. So I feel like this is not taking in consideration everything that really factors in a housing affordability. And yes, first-time home buyers, I feel bad for them because this is their reality. But for the 74% of the people that are not first-time home buyers, this is not their reality, because they have the advantage of building that equity since they purchased. So I know a lot of the negative articles are talking about this, but think about it. In 2020, housing was super affordable, right? So now we're just catching up and getting back to square one. You know, because I mean, we're only 8% below the index. You know, we were 70% above the index in affordability. It's not like we're 70% below the affordability index. We're just 8%. And to me, all the equity people have in their homes, and I tried to Google some places. It looks like we are, and let me finish this chart and then I'll go to the equity chart. So this also breaks down by area, right? So it has the Northeast, Midwest, South, and West. Look at the West. So and this is the affordability index. Their affordability index is only 66. So that means it's 34% more expensive than the median house. So that median homeowner is paying $623 for a house. They're only making 107. They need to be making 162. Right? And we are in the South, so we're kind of more probably in this range here, where the median price is around 375. You know, they're making 90, they should be making 97. But again, if they're bringing so much equity in with them, they're easily making up that difference. So it shows even the areas of the country, and obviously the West is dealing with California and Seattle, and you know, those areas there are very unaffordable still. So I thought this was an interesting way. When you read about affordability, this is how they're calculating it. So median price at the current mortgage rate compared to the median household income. And it's a very simple way of looking at it. I think it's more complex than that because of that equity that people are bringing with them. All right, I'm going to show. There's another chart.
I like that chart a lot. This is Lauren. I have a question.
Sure.
I'm curious if we could do this for Charleston too, because you know we know the median price of homes, and we can calculate all of this. We could just look at the median family income in Charleston. That would be
I will do that for the next time. So all we need to do, you know, to your point, is we just need to know what's the median price, which obviously we have the MLS. We can see it. We just saw it. We know what the current mortgage rate is. The only number that we're missing is basically what's the median family income. And I will do that for the next time and show you where we're at. And I mean, obviously this 7.15, it's not 7.15 today, but I also want to, like, while we're still on this chart, it's like, and I'm not saying this is going to happen next year, but let's say rates come back to 5.5. What's that going to do to this affordability? It's going to go way higher again, right? I mean, to go from 7.75 or wherever the mortgage rate balance is today back to 5.5, we're going to shoot right back up this affordability chart with prices. Even if prices go up a little bit, it's going to shoot back up. There was another, and I don't have this up here, but there was another, and I'm looking on my phone for it. There was a comment that I thought was very interesting. And again, this is all, I'm talking a lot about affordability just because I think it's such a relevant conversation to where we're at today. So this was from Moody's Analytics. So the chief economist was saying, at the current 8% mortgage rate, so if mortgage rates are 8%, people are spending 38% of their income. So again, that's 38% of their income based off of a 20% down payment or equity move. So if people are spending 38%, that's above the norm for qualification. So what this analyst is saying is, for housing to return to affordability, rates need to come down to, one of three things need to happen, or a combination. Rates need to come down to 5.5%, or the median price of the houses have to fall 22%, or the median income has to increase 28%. Now, again, I think this is a statement that's not really looking at how much equity people have in their homes, right? It's like the prices don't have to come down 22% because people have 20% of equity in their home already. So I take, the articles you read, it's like, this is what they're talking about affordability, but I think there's so many things in the background that they're not, it's too easy of a look. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I'm going to pop up this screen here. This is from, let me see here. All right, I'm going to go to Fred. Jackie, is that up on the screen now? The Fred. Okay, so this is the Federal Reserve St. Louis. So, I mean, this is, again, a reliable source of information. So this is, look at this, and you can find all different types of charts on this. So this is owner's equity in real estate as a percentage of household real estate. So this is the equity portion that people have in their homes in the US, right? And look, and it goes back to in the 1940s, right? So here's 1940s, and there's a blip in years. I don't know what happened here, but that's way in the past. So, and then the gray are the recession periods. And so what it shows is that, where are we at today? We have today, it's 71% equity in homes, right? And this is the St. Louis Fed. I mean, I'm not like coming up with this information on my own. So 71%. So to use an affordability index showing people putting 20% down, to me, like, yeah, that's tough as a first-time home buyer to have the 20% and to do that. But think about what's happened. What's since pre-COVID, how much are house prices up in Charleston? And yes, it's different in different areas, but let's just use a ballpark. We're in the 30 to 40% range, right? From 2019, we're probably in the 30 to 40% range, right? So if you owned a home and you borrowed 100% 3 or 4 years ago, how much equity do you have in your house? 30 to 40%. And that was putting nothing down with no cash buyers. So that's why this number is not shocking to me, because if you have 20 to 30% of the people, putting cash down, and then you have other people putting 20, 40, 50% or bringing their equity with them. So we only owe 29%. If you take the opposite, only 29% of the value is mortgaged. And I Googled until I could find it. And again, I don't know if this is accurate or not. I was like, well, what percentage of the US houses don't have a mortgage at all? Right. So this is a percentage of equity. My question I was asking was like, what percentage of houses don't have a mortgage? And the numbers I can find are in the low 40s, so like 42%. So 42% of people don't have a mortgage at all on their houses. So if they want to buy a different house, how much equity are they bringing with them? The whole thing, 100%, right? So even if your cash purchase is only 30%, you still have more people that have paid off their mortgages. So all of this talking about affordability reflects, it's like, I know everybody's questioning the affordability, but there's so much equity in homes right now. When people are selling and buying, that's where they're making it more affordable. Yes, 8% rates are tough if you're having to buy a house now, or if you're a first-time home buyer and you've never owned a house. Yes, you're dealing with that at the moment. But look in the post-recession, the total, I mean, look at that drop. We were at the almost 62% range pre-recession, and we went down to 46%. So that's total equity in percentage in homes. But you can see in the 60s and 70s and 80s, very high inflationary periods, right? This was super high inflation, super high rates. We're about the same place, right? We're about the same number of, percentage equity in homes. So, and you can see prior to the war, we were probably in the 80-90% range. So most people were paying cash for their houses. And if they didn't have cash, they might not have been buying a house. But then over time, as lending became more prevalent, it started to come down. And then obviously this challenge right here was because house values were crashing, right? And then we see the recovery way before COVID, right? This is a recovery in house prices and people putting more and more money down in their houses. And then you can see where we're at. I mean, 71% is a very high percentage of equity in homes. So, this was, and I'll go back to this. Let me go back to this chart here. So what I would love to kind of have as really talking about affordability is blending in how much equity people have in their homes, because this is just assuming straight up you don't own a home and you're putting 20% down. But as soon as you make up this 8% gap here, right, this 8% is what we're under, and we have way more than that in to assume that there's only 20% down is a misassumption, because look at the equity, like that Fred chart, we have 71% equity in our homes. So if everybody sold their home in the US today and was buying another home, they would be bringing 71% equity with them to the same price house, right? So this is, to me, a downfall with talking about how unaffordable homes are right now, is because of this. And what shows that homes are very affordable right now? It's so hard to get a seller to sell because they're living, think about it, sellers right now are living in this world or before, and you're asking them to enter this world, right? The same house, you're asking them to go from here to here for the exact same home. So what's that motivation for the seller? It's got to be a very defining reason, right? Job transfer from out of town, maybe they're retiring and moving to another location, getting married, death, divorce. I mean, it's got to be a defining reason to consciously leave this as an existing homeowner, to leave this and go to here. So again, when you read articles and they talk about affordability, this is kind of what they're basing the information off of. And you can, simply look, payment as a percentage of income. We were at 14.7%. Now we're at 27.3%. And honestly, at almost 8%, we're probably closer to 29%. So we've doubled the payment as a percentage of income. So even though people's income have gone up, house payments have gone up way faster. So you're asking that same person to double their payment on principal and interest, more than double. And that's our challenge, not just right now, but next year, that's still a challenge. And until rates come back down and they start with the 5s, 6 is great for first-time home buyers, or if you don't own a house, that's great. But does this range motivate you if you're living back here? I'm not convinced it does. You're asking people to double their mortgage rate. I'm not sure that's motivating enough. Maybe if you get into the mid 5s, if there's, enough reason, people are making more money, maybe there's enough motivation to make that move on houses. But, from a standpoint of, I'm just not sure. I think this motivates, and this is my point moving forward, is that if we go back, and again, it's not like we're going to go from 8 to 5.5 overnight, right? We're going to pass through the 7s and pass through the 6s. So once we get to this range here, I feel like that's going to motivate buyers faster than motivating sellers, right? Because if you have buyers looking at 8% right now, and they decide to rent for another year, and then the year they wake up and the rate is this, now they're going to be motivated. right? So, but we're not necessarily motivating these people to leave their houses. So I feel like as the rates come down, we could again get in a position of we're not increasing the supply enough and we're increasing the demand faster than supply. So it's just, you know, all these things are something to watch over time. But this is a great, and to Lauren's point, like I'm gonna do this for Charleston, so the next call we can kind of see, and I'll try to make a simple chart of it. And I don't know if I can look up, you know, this Fred chart that shows the homeowner percentage. I don't know if I can find out in Charleston specifically if there's enough data to see, well, what percentage of equity do homeowners have in Charleston? But it's still going to be over 50% in my opinion. And that's what's making this, even though the numbers say this is not affordable, it's still affordable because you already own your house. So anybody have any questions on this?
Well, I was thinking maybe as we're preparing for a listing appointment, have all this already, like try to determine what they have in equity, you know, based on what you can see, you know, cancel out what they got to pay in taxes and fees to, you know, commissions and things like that. And just show them, all right, your current monthly payment is bam. If we buy this house at, you know, 600,000, even at 8%, if you use your equity, put it down, this is going to be your monthly payment. It's only going up $50 or $100, and you're making more money in salary now anyway. And break it down to that monthly payment.
Yeah. And I think to your point, it's like most people are making more money than they were when they bought their existing home. But also, if they're comfortable with the payments at 8%, then once rates go down to, I mean, I have somebody that we're closing a house in 2 weeks, and I'm like, you're probably going to refinance your house a couple times, right? Not once, you're probably going to do it a couple times. So this is, and again, I'll go back in time, is that, so I bought a house in Hamlin in 2008, I want to say. And rates were, this was probably right before the recession really kind of hit. So it was 5.75% on a ARM, right? I refinanced it to 4 and then the recession happened and rates came down. So 5.75% on an ARM, and then I did 4.75% on a 30-year fixed, and then I refinanced again at 3.75 on a 30-year fixed, and then I refinanced again at 2.875 on a 15-year ARM. So I refinanced the same house 3 times, probably within a 3-year period. But, and I think we're in a position that this could happen again. So if we're at 8% now and rates go to 6.75, right? That's a point and a quarter. Is your owner going to wait to refinance until it goes lower, or are they just going to instantly take, okay, we have no guarantee it's going to go below this, but I can instantly save money on my payment at 1.25% spread? They're probably going to refinance, right? It would make sense to, you know, so you could refinance. If you're at 8 and you go to 6.75, you're probably refinancing. What if it goes to 5.5? You're probably refinancing again, right? So I could see people who have purchased and are above 7.5%, they might refinance their house twice over the next 2 to 3 years.
What do you think the average cost is to refi? Like, there's going to be fees in there.
So the spread that they usually say that you want to achieve is 1 point. So you need that to pay back the costs, right? You want 1 point different in the interest rate. So if it's 8, you got to go to 7. If it's 7, you got to go to 6. So anything a half point or less, probably you do the math on it, unless you're in the house for 30 years, who is, it probably doesn't make sense. So, you know, once you reach that point difference, then you start crunching the numbers and it might make sense to do that. And I mean, I did it 3 times when it was a point different, basically, because it financially made sense. Now, did I know we were going to go from 5.75 to 4.75 to 3.75 to 2.8? I didn't know that, right? If I would have known that, I would just waited and refinanced once, but nobody knows that. So So once you start reaching a point or more difference in your interest rate and the current rate, you really need to look at refinancing that house. But again, to your point we were making earlier, it's like if you can afford to sell your house, buy a house at 8%, and it's in your comfort level of what you make, well, then it's only going to get better if you refinance, right? You're going to be in the clear. And again, nobody's smart enough to say rates are going to be 5.5% by 2025. I mean, nobody really knows what's about to happen. But if you're comfortable at the current rate and it's fixed, then it can only get better from there. And I tell people, it's like, if you're worried about inflation, the best way to fight inflation is having a fixed payment on your most expensive purchase, right? It's like home ownership fights inflation because you have a 30-year fixed payment. What do you have control over rent? You have no control over rent, right? A year from now, and again, these apartment complexes, whoever it is, it's like they're going to get you in there, and then a year passes by pretty quickly, right? And then what are they going to do? They're going to try to go up on the rent a lot because they know the pain of moving is going to be taking consideration of how much they can bump your rent. So, and you have no control over what they're going to do. Whereas this is a fixed payment for as long as you're in the house. Granted, you can do ARMs or whatever, but most people are still doing 30-year fixed programs. So it's all, and again, I think the next year and a half, our conversation is centered around affordability, right? It's the price of the house, it's rates, it's where are you coming from, how much equity you're bringing with you. All of that, it's all affordability calculations because, I mean, people want to move, right? It's not a matter of not having people who want to move. I mean, I got a lot of people that want to buy houses, but it's the math that bogs them down on affordability. So I think it's a good understanding of this information and how they're calculating and where it's coming from. But most importantly is that, if your buyer is going to if your seller who wants to be a buyer is going to make a move, they really need to sit down and do the math and realize that, hey, I'm making more money. Yeah, rates are 8%, but here's the payment. It's in my window. I can refinance in the future. So all of that has to go into your conversation with them. Any more thoughts or questions? All right, well, I'll work on the affordability and see what information I can find for specifically for the Charleston area. But worst case, we can go through and I can get pretty close on some assumptions of different areas. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see different areas of town at different prices. But I'll work on that for the next time. So, all right.
Great, Anton. Thank you.
Yep. Well, everybody have a great weekend out there. And we'll do this again in a month. Hello.
Thanks.
Yep. Bye.